When it comes down to prairie land, we are very limited in the amount of land that we have that are actually in especially native prairie. There's been a lot of tillage, there's been a lot of agriculture production, but there's also been a lot of urbanization and everything that has taken over a lot of our prairie lands. If we keep this path, it leads to, unfortunately, actually leads to societal failure. Since that time in 1993, it had not been used for livestock production and just was land sitting in rest. So one thing when we're dealing with these prairie ecosystems, when they've been sitting in rest and haven't been managed, we're dealing with a lot of vegetation matter. And if it's not managed, it's going to just build up over time. As we can see here on the ground, this is a large amount of vegetation. And what is our potential problem that's going to happen? We could easily have a fire come through and it would just take off in this. It's like kindling. If we have cattle here to graze it, we can reduce this biomass in this thatch area. We're very limited on the tools we can use for managing and taking care of these prairies. The livestock I actually picked were cows. So why did I pick cattle? You know, I could have picked sheep, I could have picked goats, I could have picked bison. So we want to pick the one that most relates to here at the Dalles Mountain Ranch and the problem we're addressing. This project has had its trials and tribulations. There's been individuals that have tried to stop this project because they say, no matter what, livestock should not be out on these lands and it's causing problems. The visual aspect of livestock on public land is typically negative.
The West has a history of cattle grazing that's abused the prairies. So when I first heard about this grazing of cattle, I was really upset, and I called the parks superintendent and I asked him what was going on. He explained to me that it was a cooperative effort with Washington State University Agriculture Extension, and that their goal was to be beneficial to the environment.
If cows have the ability to overgraze and destroy a piece of ground, if they're managed that way, then if we change the way we manage the cows, we should be able to do positive things.
The cattlemen and the cattlemen of Washington State, they want to see positive results out of this. They want to show that they do know how to manage land. The reason I was doing this prairie ecosystem, and really some of the motivation, is we want to see the health of an area. And when we have the loss, and when we have monocultures of agriculture crops, or when we don't have our prairie systems that are managed correctly, like they used to be hundreds of years ago, we start losing bird species, we start losing insect species. Why do we want these bird diversity and insect diversity and plant diversity? Is because it's the ecosystem that sustains life.
project that my cows and my family is involved with is a prairie restoration project on the Dalles Mountain Ranch. And we have been doing this for about 6 years now. We come down in the fall, late fall, to graze the pastures that Steve and Vleet from WSU has set up. Our goal is to change the plant community to try to enhance more native plant species within the fields that we've been putting the cows on. They're old farm fields that were seeded to one variety of grass, blue bunch wheatgrass, and we want to change that and get some more native plant variety in it.
Probably one of the most surprising things when it comes to this project is the change that can happen quite suddenly. After 1 year of grazing, a mob grazing type system where I evaluate the plants, the animal health, and look at the next year, it was amazing to me at looking at some of the transition and seeing the quality of not only the quality of the grasses that were coming back, but the amount of forbs and how quickly they could come back after sitting for so long.
The highlight, the emotional highlight for me during the course of the year is walking the prairie in the spring, in March and April, and realizing how beneficial the grazing has been in terms of revitalizing the life of the plants. And the first time I experienced that, I actually felt tears coming down my face as I realized what an improvement we had created and how life is really enhanced. And I feel my spirit basically dancing on the prairie. So what I try to do is to get people to come out here in March and April and May, because that's when it's very exciting. The fields here are a sea of yellow and a sea of blue from the balsam root and the lupin, but also there are pinks and whites and everything in but purples. It's amazing, the colors that are here, and they're only an hour and a half or so from Portland. A prairie to me is rolling hills with lots of wildflowers, some sage, some rabbit brush, maybe an oak or other tree interspersed. The next emotional experience I had was after we walked the site within 6 months after first hearing about it and after the cattle had been there. I was seeing plants that were really doing well, native plants, and I realized there had not been damage done, but there had been benefit by reducing some of the non-native coverage and disturbing the soil. It had helped the native plants. And then I was actually verbally assaulted by a close friend of mine who felt I was an infidel, an environmental infidel, for going to the other side. And I basically, once again, invited him to come look at the results for himself.
The decision to implement this project was really the easy part of it. It was the challenges that we've had to face over the last 7 years that have been very interesting. So that's why it's been so important working collaboratively with the state parks, with the environmental community, and with other individuals at Washington State University, because we could not do it alone. One of the main reasons we have to manage these prairies is because if we didn't, we have a lot of different problems now. We have invasive plants that have moved in from Eurasia that have really taken over. And if we do not manage, if we just say, oh, we'll let things and it'll all turn back to how it was 200 years ago, it will never happen that way. Then if we don't have the diversity, what don't we have? We don't have the insects, which are flying around us right now. We don't have the birds. We don't have the wildlife that surrounds us. And we don't have the beauty that we can enjoy every day. What you see here is a dragonfly, and the reason they kind of call them dragonfly is because they're kind of like a dragon. They're voracious appetite, they have huge eyes, they can see very, very well, but they will eat many, many insects, and they eat a lot. And they catch mosquitoes, of course, so it's a very beneficial insect. This is a darner, a type of darner dragonfly, and it's very beautiful, as you can see. We always are encountered with many, many problems, which is a difficult thing when you're trying to do any type of restoration work. We face fire, of course, is one of our biggest challenges in these dry ecosystems, but we also face the invasive weeds that are moving into the area. This is a monoculture here of Medusa head. So really you would want to get this controlled. This has taken over everything. It's outcompeted all the native grasses. It's outcompeted all the other native forbs. And when this forms this mat, what it does is just think if a fire comes through here. After a fire, and we'll show some of the effects, one of our problems, of course, is fire. And when it races through here, the first things to come back are typically our weeds. And so these, when they start to take over, can be very damaging in our grassland systems. So also, when we're dealing with these prairie ecosystems, the soil is the most important factor. It's the most important factor for any type of plant production, whether we're dealing with crop production or these grassland prairie ecosystems. So in looking at the soil, if we have a fire come through, or if we have a lot of impact, such as tillage, those sort of things, we have bare soil. Bare soil is our problem. That's when we're going to get the invasive weeds, a lot of weeds coming in. If we get the cover, such as arrowleaf balsam root, this vegetation cover, that's the best thing. This shows you the good structure of soil. And if we had a fire come through, burn off all the vegetation, and then we had bare soil and we had a flash flood or a rain event, it would wash this and the soil would erode. And we have a lot of problems worldwide with soil erosion. So we want to preserve this soil because that's the only way we're going to get any type of crop to grow or any type of plant to grow. So we want this good structure. And once we have bare soil, it's prone to high erosion and less diversity of plants.
Our effort is in tipping the balance towards nature and the native species. So we're collecting seed here this time of the year and even earlier, and then after the grazing is completed and the ground has been disturbed, let's say in November, December, I'll come back with this seed and we'll spread it, and that's how we tip the balance towards the native plants and nature.
Are grasslands important? Yes, they are. They're important to everybody. It doesn't matter where you live. Grasslands are a whole community of living things besides the grass. And everything depends on how healthy that grass is, the grasslands are. And grass was developed to be grazed, whether it was elk, antelope, bison, or cows, sheep. Grass needs to be clipped at the proper time to regenerate beautiful, lush growth. And the bugs, the worms, the birds, everybody's happy when we have good grasslands.
So on the global side of things, if we think about this type of study needs to be done everywhere in the world. So this is just one initial little trial, but this needs to be done in other countries all across the world so that we can show we can actually change this for the better.
So I think it's very important for us to remember that if it were not for the cattle that are grazing just for a few months at a time in the late fall, we would not have a restoration project. In other words, the site needs disturbance and it needs to have the thatch removed so that you can have seed, native seed to soil contact. When people ask me, who am I doing this for? What is who's going to be the audience of this restoration project? And I have to think it's going to be the whole community. Each year, we've been finding new and additional plants we've added to our plant list. So the whole spectrum of environmentalists, from the experts to the novices, benefit from the Dalles Mountain Prairie restoration.
The reason that we do this is what we love. And this is going to be a future cowboy bringing Sizemore cows down to this ranch for prairie restoration.